Week 10 of the fantasy baseball season, and here's a few hitters I would drop this week. The first guy is Manny Grandal of the Chicago White Sox. I mentioned weeks ago to drop Grandal, but it's very surprising to me he was still owned in 62% of fantasy leagues. But now with the poor start to the season and him on the injured list with back spasms, there's pretty much no excuse but to drop him at this point here. On the season, 2 home runs, 15 RBI, 6 runs scored, a 185 average, and a 294 on base. I know his on base is pretty good to his average, and I know he's a great power hitter over the last few seasons, hitting 20-plus home runs. Last season, 23 homers, 62 RBIs, and we know catch is a weak position, but Grandal just not getting the job done. Batting average is way low. Maybe these back spasms will only be a short-term thing here for him on the injured list. But I still couldn't trust him, even though I know he was getting it going a little bit with 2 multiple hit games in the last 2 games before he went out. But now with the injury and the lack of production this season, he's definitely droppable. June 4th at Tampa, 0 for 2. June 5th at Tampa, 1 for 4 with 2 ribs. June 8th versus the Dodgers, 1 for 4. June 9th versus the Dodgers, 1 for 4 with a rib. June 10th versus Texas, 2 for 3, 3 RBIs. And June 11th versus Texas, 2 for 2. And now he's been out the last 2 nights here with the back injury. So Grandal, I know catch is weak, but there's no reason to hold on to him. He wasn't getting things going at all, really. And he's just a guy that's been hit or miss over the last few seasons for fantasy baseball. The next guy, Luis Urias of the Milwaukee Brewers. So this Brewer team, they've been on a tailspin over the last few weeks here, losing 8 out of 9 ball games, especially to some weaker teams as well, like the Miami Marlins and the Washington Nationals. And now they got a tough series coming up, starting here tonight versus the New York Mets. And Urias this season, he hasn't really done anything after last season was a breakout year for him with 23 homers and 75 RBIs, hitting 250. But this year, 6 home runs, 13 RBIs, 19 runs scored, 218 average, and a 319 on base. So the only positives I could take out of this with Urias, his on-base percentage is 101 points higher than his batting average, and he's only struck out 31 times in 124 at-bats. He's putting the ball in play, and at least he's making some contact. And he does qualify at second, third, and short, but now he's day-to-day as well here as Urias with a hamstring injury, and that's never a good sign for anybody, especially in Major League Baseball, when they get a hamstring injury. So the last few games here for Urias, June 7th versus Philly, 0 for 4. June 8th versus Philly, 0 for 4. June 9th versus Philly, 1 for 4. June 10th at the Nationals, 0 for 4. June 11th at Washington, 1 for 3, a homer, 2 RBIs. And June 12th at Washington, 0 for 2. So right now that hamstring, we'll see what it is with him. But they're going to take a wait-and-see approach. A report came out yesterday afternoon about Luis Urias. And he has been dropped in 2% of fantasy leagues, but still owned in 46% of leagues. But the struggles have been mighty for him. Over the last month, he's done nothing pretty much. A 196 average with 4 homers and 9 RBIs. And right now, this week, I think he's an easy play to drop. The next guy is Connor Joe of the Colorado Rockies. So Connor Joe, I mentioned him as a drop candidate 3 or 4 weeks ago. And he pretty much hasn't done much either, is Joe. On the season, only 5 home runs, 15 RBIs, 31 runs scored, a 256 average, 352 on base, and 3 stolen bases. But the last month of the season, he's pretty much been non-existent at all in terms of stats. 218 average, 333 on base, a homer, 4 RBIs, and 14 runs scored. And it's surprising to me he's still owned as well in 48% of fantasy leagues. In 10 and 12 team leagues, I think it's pretty easy to cut Connor Joe loose. I know he leads off for this Rocky team, which has some decent hitting in this lineup, obviously, with C.J. Cron. Brandon Rogers has come on a little bit. Charlie Blackmon, he's been up and down so far this season, but they're still struggling. The guys aren't driving in runs. I know Chris Bryant's been out majority of the season on and off the injury list, but Connor Joe, he's definitely been slumping over the last 5-6 weeks of the season. June 5th versus Atlanta, 0 for 3 with a run. June 7th at the Giants, 2 for 4, a homer and RBI, stolen base, 2 runs scored. June 8th at the Giants, 2 for 4. June 9th at the Giants, 0 for 4 with a run. June 10th at the Padres, 0 for 4. June 11th in a doubleheader at the Padres, 2 for 8. And June 12th at the Padres, 0 for 5. So right here, he's been slumping mightily. And this is what you got to do sometimes. Even if a guy starts off hot for the season, you have him on your roster. And then when things start to go sour and the other way, you drop him. And that's the case here with Connor Joe. And I just think too many owners have held on to him too much over the last couple weeks. The next guy, Harrison Bader of the St. Louis Cardinals. So Harrison Bader, he's been a pretty solid hustling player this season here for this Cardinal team. And even last season, pretty solid, 16 home runs, 50 RBIs, 9 stolen bases, 45 runs scored at 267 average and 324 on base. But on the season here, 5 homers, 19 RBIs, 30 runs scored. I know this is where he comes into play big time. One of the best stolen base guys in the league with 14, with a 260 average and a 304 on base. So his on base to batting average ratio isn't good at all, in my opinion. Only 44 points higher. And this is where he gets in trouble here, is Harrison Bader. Swinging early in the count and getting out, either striking out or popping up quickly, is Bader. And over the last couple weeks here, it hasn't been all that great. A 158 average with a 238 on base percentage. So Bader, he was off to a great start, and just like Connor Joe, off to a monster start in the beginning of the season, but he's really tailed off, especially the last 5 games. June 5th at Chicago, 2 for 5, 2 runs. June 7th at Tampa, 2 for 4 with a rib. June 8th at Tampa, 1 for 4. June 9th at the Rays, 0 for 3. June 10th at Cincinnati, 0 for 3. June 11th versus Cincinnati, 0 for 2. June 12th versus Cincinnati, 0 for 3. So right now, he's in a bad slump, Harrison Bader. Only hitting 1 for his last 13. And he bats on the bottom of this lineup as well. And he also got sat down in yesterday's ball game versus the Pittsburgh Pirates. So maybe he needed a day off to clear his head. But obviously with the struggles, this St. Louis Cardinal team, they want to get back on track here after not playing that good. Losing, going 2-5 in the last 7 games here is the St. Louis Cardinals. So right now, Bader, we'll see if he gets back into action today. I know it's a doubleheader versus the Pittsburgh Pirates, and obviously he's at least going to play one of those ball games. But right here, the Cardinals, they're trying to make a push right now with the Brewers struggling. They're trying to go for tops in that division, and we've seen them call up some guys over the last few weeks. Juan Yepes 6-7 weeks ago, Nolan Gorman, and now Matthew Liberarte back up in the rotation as well. So right now, Bader, he's been struggling. Team leagues, I definitely would drop Bader this week, and the 5th and final hitter I look to drop this week's Justin Turner of the Los Angeles Dodgers. So Justin Turner, he's been great in his Los Angeles Dodger career, but this season here, this might finally be the time. Most of his talent here is Turner at 37 years old on the season, 4 home runs, 31 RBIs, a 213 average, 281 on base, and 25 runs scored. We know Turner last season got off to a mighty slow start and finished the year with 27 and 87 with a 278 average. But right now, it's just been nothing at all for him in terms of stats and helping the Dodgers or fantasy owners. The last 2 weeks here for Turner, no home runs, 2 RBIs, 5 runs scored, a 174 average, and a 283 on base. So this Dodger team, it's been tough for them over the last couple weeks here. They split with the Mets, then they went to the White Sox, and they beat them 2 out of 3. And then the San Francisco Giants swept them on the weekend that just passed here. So right here, this whole team, I feel like, is in a little bit of a tailspin. And I thought by now they'd be running away with the division. But guys like Turner, Cody Bellinger struggling once again. Max Muncy was struggling before he went on the injured list. And that's definitely been a problem. So right now, Turner, maybe he definitely lost it at the age of 37 now, after he's been putting up great numbers for 5+ years with this Dodger team. June 5th versus the Mets, 0 for 4. June 7th at the White Sox, 1 for 4. June 8th at the White Sox, 0 for 4. June 9th at the White Sox, 0 for 3. June 10th at San Francisco, 1 for 4 with a run. And June 11th at San Francisco, 0 for 4. June 12th, 1 for 4 in that one. So right here, he's in a big tailspin and a big slump with only 3 hits here is Justin Turner since June 4th, and that's a definite struggle. Yes, he could turn things around. Yes, he's a second half hitter over the last couple seasons. But right now, I would drop him with better options that I mentioned in yesterday's video on the waiver wire. So that's a few hitters I look to drop here for Week 10 of the fantasy baseball season.